Mr. Carter, are you ready to continue the examination in chief of the accused?
Yes, Lord.
All right, would the accused come back to the witness box then, please? Mr. Adams, you were sworn yesterday and you are still under oath.
Mr. Adams, we just got to the point yesterday when you were describing how you had asked this man to leave your apartment with his friends and he had refused. And then your friend, Miss Hawes, had come out of the bathroom.
Yes, sir. That's
Now,
right.
after she spoke to Leaks, what did he do?
Well, sir, it's like I was saying. He had been sort of pacing back and forth in front of the door to the apartment over there. And he had his hands in his pockets, and, well, he was just kind of looking kind of tough over there. And then, as soon as she said that, as soon as she said, "I hope your daughter's name rots in hell," he just stopped dead, sir. Just stopped dead and turned around and took his hands out of his pockets. And so I've never in my entire life seen a look in a man's face like I saw in his look at that moment.
Did you have any idea that she was going to say this to him?
No, sir. No, I didn't know that.
Did you have any idea of what effect it might have on him?
Well, sir, I knew that Bruce really loved his daughter, and I knew that he really wanted to see his daughter a lot, but you know, it's like I was saying, his wife had left him before and had taken the daughter away, and I guess I know why he was mad, sir.
All right. Well, then, after you saw this look, just what did he do?
Well, sir, he stopped just for a second, and as he was taking his hands out of his pockets, he started coming across the room, sir. And he's just sort of swinging his arms, just like that, sir.
All right. How long did it take before he got across the room to where you were?
Well, sir, it took a while because what happened was that as soon as he started to come, I yelled at him. I said, "Stop, Leak, stop!" And he kept right on coming. And you know, and I started backing up when he started coming across, and so that it took a while because we ended up backing all the way across the room.
And could you have backed up any further than you had?
What do you mean when it finally happened?
Yes.
No, sir. I was right up against the fridge. There was no place else to go.
Then, son, had you ever fired a gun before?
Not a handgun, no, sir. Never.
All right. How much time did you have to decide whether or not you were going to fire that gun?
Well, sir, I never really even decided to fire the gun. It just happened. He kept coming, and I kept telling him to stop. I pointed it at him, and he didn't stop. And I kept telling him for the last time, stop. I had both hands on the gun, and I was holding it in front of me. I took my thumb off the hammer to show him, and he still didn't stop. So I couldn't think at all. I was so frightened.
What did you think he was going to do?
I thought he was going to kill my wife, sir.
You love your wife?
Very much.
You ever been present when she'd ever been threatened like that before?
Never, sir. Never.
So then, do I understand from what you've said that we have this man approaching your wife? Where was your wife standing?
Well, sir, she was sort of behind me on the right.
We have this man approaching you.
Yes, sir.
And with a look of terror that you'd never seen before, is that?
In Leak, sir?
You said? Yes.
He was like an animal, sir, just like a crazed animal.
All right. So then we have this crazed animal approaching you.
Yes, sir.
To kill your wife, you think.
I thought so, sir.
And you have this gun in your hand, and you've backed up as far as you can back. You show him that the gun is cocked. And then, did you have any alternative other than to pull the trigger?
I didn't think so, sir.
All right. After you pulled the trigger, what happened to him?
Oh, what happened to Leak, sir?
Yes.
Well, he just stopped right where he was. And
how far away from you was he then?
I'd say about 3 feet, sir.
All right. He stopped where he was?
Yes, sir, and he just stopped, and then he turned. I think he might have said that. I think he might have sworn, sir, but it's really hard for me to remember exactly that moment.
Had anything like this ever happened to you before?
No, sir. I can't even remember ever being in a fight recently, sir.
Now, he went out eventually out of the room, is that right?
Well, I think so, sir. The things that happened right after then are sort of a blur. I remember the next time that I saw him, he was just down at the second floor landing. I guess everybody had been running out of the room, and I ran to the top of the stairs.
And was he at the bottom of the stairs then?
Yes, sir. There's a landing just at the foot of the stairs at the second floor, and he was sort of crouched down there.
Had everybody else gone by this time?
I don't think so, sir. I just remember seeing down there, and Danny Longfellow was going down the stairs behind him at that point.
And Longfellow, had you known him for some period of time?
Well, I guess I met him about 2 years before, sir, in Tilsonburg. He lived in Tilsonburg. I was never really that close to him, sir.
What did you know about him?
Well, he was. I guess the word that I would use would be vicious. I was always kind of wary of him. You know, he was pretty tough. He was a street fighter. He had a reputation for that anyway.
Did you know whether or not either of these two people had any weapons with them?
On this time, no.
Yes.
Well, I mean, Bruce Leaks had hand-to-hand combat training in the Army, so that as far as I'm concerned, his whole body was a weapon. But they weren't really carrying anything, no, sir. Not this time.
Nothing that you saw?
Well, they had jackets on, sir. They might have been. But 2 nights before they had, like I was saying before, 2 nights before they'd come with the crowbar and the club.
All right. Well then, when Longfellow turned on the stairs toward you.
Yes, sir.
What happened?
Well, I yelled at him to stay down there, sir, and then he turned, and I thought he was going to come back up, and so I fired down towards his feet to scare him, sir, because I didn't want to shoot him. I didn't want to do anything. But he turned and he started coming back up the stairs, and so I thought that he was coming back up and that he was going to kill us all, and so I had to fire.
All right. Did you fire the gun at any other time that night?
Well, yes, sir. After I fired it, then I went back into the apartment, and there were people running all over the place, and I ran to the window. It was actually just inside the door there to the right, and I opened the window to look out, and I saw, I think it was Pat Kelly was running back towards the house across the lawn, and he'd come earlier with these guys before, and so I figured that he was coming back in, and so I fired a shot into the ground to warn him to stay away.
All right. Then, by this time, had everyone else left the apartment?
Well, no, sir. There was, I think at that point, Frank and Roberta and Goldie were still there because I turned and they were in the apartment and they said that we all had to get out of there.
And then did they leave then?
Yes, sir. Then everybody went down the stairs and I took a look around and then I guess I went down behind them.
How much time elapsed between the time that they went down the stairs and the time that you went down the stairs?
Well, sir, it couldn't have been very long because when I got to the bottom of the stairs, down on the main floor, I guess I was just coming down the stairs and I saw Goldie down in the landing, and she was telling Ed, that's the superintendent of the place, Ed Lucas, to call an ambulance. And so I guess I must have been almost right behind them, sir.
All right. Where was Leaks this time?
Well, Bruce was lying in the hallway. I guess it's about 10 feet wide in the hallway down there, and he was lying sort of maybe a foot in front of the door across the hallway, so that it was hard to open the door, sir. He was sort of lying on his face.
Right. Was he moving?
No, sir, he wasn't moving at all. I thought he was dead.
You thought he was dead?
Oh, yes, sir.
Right. Ever seen a dead person before?
No, sir, never.
And did you go down the stairs?
Yes, sir, I didn't want to. I sure didn't want to go over that body, but...
Is there any other way to get out of the house?
No, sir.
All right. So then when you got down to the bottom of the stairs, in which direction did you go?
Well, Goldie was sort of stepping over the body, sir, and she was trying to go, the door opens inward, and it wasn't open very wide, and so I came up out of the body, and I had to go around by his head, and step over that way to go through the narrow opening. It was only open maybe 10 inches, 12 inches, somewhere like that.
All right. And as you were stepping over the body, what happened?
Well, just like I was saying, I pushed Goldie through, and I just stepped over, I guess, with my left foot. And you know, like, I mean, I was really frightened at that time, really nervous, because it's like I said, I'd never seen a dead body before, and I just knew he was dead, and I stepped over him, and just when I went to step over him, all of a sudden, I thought that I felt his hand grab my ankle.
Right. So that you thought that he was dead.
Yes, sir.
And then as you were moving over him, you thought that this dead body had grabbed you.
Yes, sir. That's what I thought happened.
And what did you do then?
I was so frightened, sir, that I just turned and looked. I couldn't even think, and I just tried to fire down at the hand to try to get it to let go of my ankle, sir. And then I was sort of stuck in the door at the same time, trying to get out because it was so narrow, and I just wanted to get out of there so badly.
After you passed through the door, where did you go?
Well, then I went out onto the street, sir, and I could see Frank and Roberta running down Hatch Street, and you know, I trusted them, and so I figured, well, I'll follow them, and so I went running down the street past them. Then I lost them soon after that.
And then I understand that ultimately you caught up with them, and
yes, sir. Well, I ran over to Frank's apartment, and Frank showed up, I guess, just after I got there.
Those are all the questions.
Mr. Affleck, cross-examination.
Well, I understand later that night you surrendered to the police?
Yes, sir, I did. I went to the police station.
At that particular time, you emptied your pockets?
Yes, sir. I believe that I had bullets in the pockets, and I gave them to the policeman.
You've heard earlier evidence in this trial to indicate you had 41 bullets actually in your pocket. Is that correct?
Well, sir, if that's what the evidence was, then, sir, that must be correct.
You had a handful of bullets that you'd put in your pocket beforehand, didn't you?
Yes, sir. I put them in my pocket.
And on the Sunday prior to this incident, you had already loaded the gun with 8 bullets, hadn't you?
Yes, sir.
And those bullets were extra, weren't they?
I'm sorry, sir?
Those 41 bullets were in addition to the 8 that you'd loaded in the gun.
Yes, sir.
So that, I take it, you did anticipate trouble, and that's why you loaded the gun.
Yes, sir. Well, it's like I was saying before, is I figured that you guys were going to come back sometime. Yes, sir.
And actually, you took the gun and you moved it from the bedroom and you took it into the refrigerator vegetable bin where it was near at hand.
Yes, sir. And also because that was a better hiding place, sir. I figured that my wife might find it if I left it in the drawer.
And you had these additional bullets in the event you needed them, and they were in your pocket.
Well, sir, yeah, I think that would be right, sir.
So that you could have, according to what you anticipated, if the trouble was great enough, discharged 8 bullets and had some extras so that you could reload. Isn't that correct?
Well, sir, I don't think I thought of it that way.
Why would you put the bullets in your pocket then?
Well, sir, I don't know, sir. I guess that when I was loading the gun, I probably took the box and emptied the rest of the bullets into my pocket.
Well, there's no question about those bullets fitting that particular gun.
Oh, no, sir, they fit the gun.
So that I put it to you in all fairness that you anticipated you might have to use those bullets in the event you discharged the 8 out of the gun.
Sir, I didn't want to shoot anybody.
I see. Well, when you surrendered yourself to the police later on that day, or later on that evening, my recollection from the evidence and my recollection from information I've received is that the police treated you very decently and politely.
Oh, yes, sir. No, the policemen, Sergeant Reddy and Sergeant Bolko, were all very good to me.
And you sought a cup of coffee and received that?
That may be, sir. They were pretty nice to me all night.
And there was no atmosphere of oppression, or no one was being nasty to you at any time, were they?
Well, sir, they sort of put me in the cell, sir, and they didn't really have a lot to do with me after that.
But nobody intimidated you on that occasion, did they? Nobody was angry with you or hostile, were they?
No, sir, they were pretty busy.
And I take it you remember surrendering yourself and going to the police and because you realized you'd done something wrong, don't you?
Well, I realized, sir, that the police were going to come looking for me eventually. And also, see, I was still pretty upset. I was still pretty frightened of these guys, and I figured that we'd be safe at the police station.
I understand that. In other words, you went to the police for protection.
Partly, sir, yes.
Yeah. And they didn't do anything to suggest that they wouldn't protect you, did they?
No, sir. They put me in the cells.
So you felt, I take it you felt much safer there than on the street with these people marauding about. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right, sir.
And in this police station where people were polite and decent to you, and you felt somewhat secure, you made some statements, didn't you? You made some comments.
I probably talked to the police officers, yes, sir.
And didn't you say to the police officers shortly after you arrived there and were unloading your pockets with these additional bullets, you might as well have these too. I don't need them anymore. I finally got rid of that bastard. You said that, didn't you?
No, sir. I certainly never, I don't remember saying anything like that.
Well, you heard the officer testify, and he said you said that.
Well, it's a long time ago, sir.
I see. You're not suggesting you didn't say it. You're just saying
Yes,
you don't
sir, I am,
recall
sir. Sir, well, sir, I recited the Bible that night. I don't know. I don't remember saying that.
I see. But you could have said it.
I suppose it's possible.
Yeah. And then you were heard to say to a sergeant there, the son of a bitch had it coming.
I don't remember saying that, sir.
You're not saying you didn't say it, you're saying you don't remember you said it. Is that correct?
Well, I'm saying that those are your words, sir. They're not my words. I don't
Well, you heard
remember
the
saying that at
officer
all.
say you said that.
Well, those are the officer's words then.
Yeah. You're saying now you didn't say it at all?
I'm saying that if you were to ask me if I said it, I'd have to say no, sir.
Are you suggesting that the officer made it up?
I'm not suggesting anything, sir. You asked me whether or not I said it.
And you're saying you didn't say it?
Sure, I didn't say it. I don't remember saying that at all. That's not the way I felt about this whole thing.
Well, if you're swearing under oath you didn't say it, you've heard the officer say that you did say it, then he must be making it up.
Well, sir, I don't know that. I don't know why he said it.
With reference to Bruce Leaks, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about him. You met him, as I understand, about 3 weeks before this incident?
Yes, sir, around the 1st of December, I guess it was.
And he used to come to your house and have a beer with you?
Sometimes, sir, yeah, he'd come over.
And up until the night of December 26th, the early morning of that date, or Christmas night, you were friendly with him?
Well, yes, sir, sort of.
And actually, he talked to you and to your wife, or your common-law wife, he talked to you about his child and how concerned he was about the fact his wife had gotten custody?
That's right, sir.
So it was apparent that he confided in you as far as his personal affairs were concerned?
Yeah, sir, he told us about him.
And then, as I understand it, he was present in your apartment on the early morning of the 26th when Dan Longfellow came to your apartment.
Yes, sir, that's right.
And when Dan Longfellow knocked on the door, because he's a street fighter and a tough guy, you were somewhat concerned, and you were reassured by Bruce Leaks. He said he'd look after him. Is that correct?
Well, that's sort of correct, sir. I was concerned not only because Danny was a street fighter, but because he'd been shaking me down before for the money that he said that I owed him. So that's partly right. And Bruce, I didn't want to let him in. I didn't want to let him in the apartment at all because I knew what he was like. And so Bruce said, no, it's all right, I'll take care of it, because Bruce is pretty tough too. And
right,
so
exactly.
I think it was all right.
So you were induced to rely on that at that time on the fact that Bruce, who could take care of himself, would look after the situation.
Yes, sir.
In other words, he was there in the capacity of a protector as far as you were concerned.
Well, that's not why he'd come up, I didn't think, sir, no, but yeah.
Well, you wouldn't have let Longfellow in because he'd been shaking you down if Bruce Leaks hadn't been there, would you?
Well, I wouldn't have wanted to let him in, no, sir.
No. And you felt that you were safe, at least as of that moment, because of the presence of Bruce Leaks, who is also a fighter. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's
And
right.
up to this particular point, he'd been friendly with you, and he confided in you, and you'd gotten along well, hadn't you?
Well, yes, sir, sort of. That's pretty well right.
And then, as I understand it, Bruce Leaks and Dan Longfellow, after Dan was there for a little while, they went into the bathroom together, and then they walked out of the place and told you they'd be back. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And when they came back 45 minutes later, Longfellow had a club of some kind, and Leaks was standing in the door jamb with a tire iron. Is that correct?
That's right, sir.
And Leaks had said something to you to the effect that he was there with his partner.
That's right, sir.
So you realized at that particular point that this erstwhile friend was now a fellow that had joined forces with Longfellow, who was shaking it down.
That's right, sir.
And at that particular time, they got 20 bucks from you.
That's all I had.
And you certainly couldn't afford to give them that money.
No, sir.
You were intimidated by the fact that each of them had a weapon.
Yes, sir.
And you gave them the 20 bucks under those circumstances of duress, didn't you?
Yes, sir. I thought they were going to kill me.
And is it not a fact that at that particular time you were peeved off as well as being frightened?
Yes, sir.
You were mad.
Well, sir, how would you feel?
Well, perhaps the court would prefer that I ask the questions and you give the answers. You were angry at that particular time.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, you went out and you got yourself this revolver.
The next day, yes, sir.
And you took this revolver and you loaded it in preparation for another rip-off or another incident. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I came back and I loaded it. I figured that they were going to come back again.
And as I understand your evidence with reference to Mr. Longfellow, he was in the apartment. He came in the apartment along with 3 other people, one of whom was Leaks.
Yes, sir. That's on the Monday night. Yes, sir. That's what happened. They
And
came
as
in.
soon as you knew that Longfellow was there, as soon as anybody came in the apartment, you went and you got the gun. Is that correct?
Well, sir, even before they got in the apartment, I think Bob had gone to the door, and there's a little peephole in the door, and he said, "It's Danny. They've come back." And even before they came in the apartment, I went back to the refrigerator to where the gun was, sir. Yes.
So you were equipped for whatever might happen at that particular time, weren't you?
Well,
you were prepared to use the gun if you had to, weren't you?
No, sir, I didn't want to use the gun. That's not why I got the gun.
Why did you get the gun?
I got the gun so, well, see, I mean, I've been shaken down by Danny Longfellow for a long time in this thing. He'd been coming after me time and time again. He says, it always ended up the same way. We'd argue, and there was nothing that I could do because we'd always get to the same position at the end where I knew if I didn't give him the money that he was going to put the boots to me. And so that when they came in on Saturday night with that club and that crowbar, busting into my apartment at 2 o'clock in the morning and taking my money again, then I knew that there was no way that I was ever going to even up the odds. I mean, I couldn't stand up to these guys unless they knew somehow that I had something that could even it up. And so I borrowed the gun. I didn't want to use the gun. That's why I borrowed it. I just wanted to make it even, so to put a little bit of fear into them.
Are you telling his lordship and this jury that you were fed up with the conduct or the attitude that had existed between you and Longfellow, and therefore you got the gun to even it up? Is that what you're telling us?
Sir, I didn't want to get killed.
I see. But you were prepared to kill somebody else in the event you had to protect yourself.
I didn't want to kill anybody, sir. That is not why I got the gun.
And that isn't why you loaded it with 8 bullets and had extra ammunition in the event it was needed. Is that what you're saying?
Well, sir, it just seemed like the natural thing to do. I got the gun, I've got the bullets, I've got to load the gun.
Now, after they entered the house, you had the gun, as you've already indicated, sometime even before they came into the room. Is that correct?
I had the gun loaded, sir, I'm sorry?
Yes. You had the gun in your hand before they came into the room.
Well, probably. I don't know how fast they got in there, sir. I didn't see them come in, like I said, but I went and I got the gun right away, if that's what you mean, sir.
And you had the gun ready, and you had it cocked even before Bruce Leaks approached your common-law wife, Goldie, didn't you?
Yes, sir. I was trying to get them to leave my apartment, and I wanted them to know that I had the gun, and they were laughing at me. But they didn't think I was going to use it.
And I take it up to this particular point, Longfellow hadn't said or done anything to you, had he?
Oh, he said a lot of things to me, sir.
What did he say to you?
Oh, he was calling me a lot of names. He was telling me that I was such a big shot, I had the gun, and that I had all the cards, I better play out the hand. And then he started arguing with me about the money again. When the same old argument all over again. It's just like I said, I knew he was going to come back and do it. And they went into it all over again. And we were having a long argument.
Well, how long was Longfellow in your apartment before something happened to Leaks?
I'd say about 15 minutes, sir.
So within that period of time, he didn't try to attack you or disarm you, did he?
No, sir.
He didn't even approach you, did he?
Who, Danny? No, sir. Danny was sort of standing in the middle and just mouthing off.
So the worst you could say about him at this particular point was that he abused you verbally. He was mouthing off. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And he had plenty of time if he wanted to disarm you or to fight with you to do so in that 15-minute span, didn't he?
I suppose if he wanted to, sir, yes.
And then you indicated that Leaks apparently got upset because of what Goldie had said to him. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
correct?
That's right, sir.
And he then approached you and you kept backing up. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We were backing up and Goldie was behind me and he kept coming at us.
And you were, at that time, because you were aware of his reputation as a street fighter, you felt he meant business.
I knew he meant business, sir.
And you shot him about 2 feet away, didn't you?
2 or 3 feet, yes, sir.
Yes. And you intended to shoot him because you were afraid of what he might do to you or to your common-law wife.
Well, sir, it's like I said, I never thought about it. I didn't have time to think about what I was doing.
Are you telling us you don't remember shooting him?
I remember when the gun went off, sir, yes.
Yeah. And you remember pulling the trigger to make it go off?
Yes, sir.
So you do remember shooting him, and you do remember pulling the trigger, don't you?
Yes, sir, but until that last moment, I didn't want to shoot anybody, sir.
But you did want to stop him, and you were afraid of him, isn't that correct?
I was scared to death, sir.
And you remember shooting him, and you remember the gun going off and the depression on the trigger, don't you?
Yes, sir.
And then Longfellow and Leaks left your apartment, is that correct?
Yes, sir. I saw them going down the stairs, and I was at the top of the stairs, sir.
And then, as I apprehend your evidence, you ran up to the top of the stairs, the top landing, and you could see Longfellow going down the stairs.
That's right, sir. I saw Danny going down behind Bruce.
And you've heard his testimony at this trial.
Yes, sir.
And he indicated to you that he turned to look back, and you fired and shot and struck him between the eyes. That's what he says, doesn't he?
Yes, sir.
And what you're telling this jury now is that here you are, you're poised at the top of the stairs with a gun. Is that correct?
So, oh, do you mean
You're
poised,
at the top
sir?
of the, all right, you're at the top of the stairs with a gun in your hand.
Yes, sir. The gun was still in my hand.
Yes. You've already shot one man, Leaks, in the chest, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
You've already shot, according to your testimony, one bullet at the feet of Longfellow.
Yes, sir.
And then you're suggesting that under all these circumstances, even though he didn't disarm you in the first 15 minutes he was in your apartment, that he suddenly decided to come back and attack you. Is that what you're telling us?
That's right, sir.
I see.
That's what I thought he was coming back for, sir.
And as I understand it, there were 6 or 7 people in your apartment that night. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. There were a large number of people there.
And as I understand the evidence as you've given it, all of these people had left, including Goldie, who was just ahead of you, your common-law wife, before you did. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I think I was the last one out of there.
So that apparently, in any event, all of these people were able to get over the body of Bruce Leaks, who was lying in the hallway.
I guess so, sir. Yeah, they must have.
And you were the only person where there was any interference, as far as you were concerned, from Leaks. Is that correct? You say
Yes,
a
sir.
hand seemed to come up.
Yeah, well, sir, it's like I said, the only person I saw going out the door was Goldie, and Bruce never grabbed Goldie. Like I said, I thought he was dead.
You thought he was dead.
Yes, sir.
And then you say he grabbed you, or you just think maybe your imagination made you think he grabbed you?
Well, sir, maybe it was my imagination.
In other words, he could have been dead.
I think he was, sir.
You think he was dead?
Yes, sir.
So it was your imagination, and then as you stepped over him, you fired into the body. Is that what you did?
Well, sir, it's like I said. I guess that I imagined that Bruce grabbed my ankle. That's what I thought, and you know, like I'd never seen a body before. I was never so scared in my entire life. It is about, well, I can't
So you're
say what I
telling this
almost did.
jury that you thought that this dead person, and you now are prepared to concede that he was dead, or probably dead at that time, grabbed at your ankle, and as a result of that, you shot into his head?
Well, sir, I didn't aim. I just turned and fired. I wanted that hand to let go of me, sir.
You weren't aiming at him at all?
Well, sir, I just turned and shot in the general direction of his hand and arm, sir.
Well, if this man is either dead or on the verge of death, couldn't you have just extricated yourself by kicking your leg forward?
Well, sir, I was so scared. I mean,
I see.
I was stuck in the doorway. I was trying to get through, and, you know, like, this entire thing was so horrible.
And what you're suggesting now is this second shot was an accidental shot. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, so I pulled the trigger.
Yes. And
Yes,
you
sir.
intended to stop this person from holding onto your ankle, didn't you?
Well, sir, it's hard to say what I thought. I guess that's probably right. I mean,
Yeah.
I wanted to get out. I just wanted to get out of there so bad.
Isn't that a fair suggestion that you wanted to get out? You
Oh,
wanted this man
yes,
to...
sir.
All right. And you wanted to get away from him, so you shot into him, didn't you? You shot into his body.
Yes, sir.
And this is the man about whom you made the comments in the police station to 2 separate police officers.
I didn't say this, sir. I didn't say that I said those statements, and I don't think I did.
You don't think you did. Therefore, the 2 officers who've testified under the circumstances you outlined, when I asked you questions as to the protective aspect of the cells and their attitude towards you, which was decent and polite, you're saying they made that up.
I didn't say that, sir. That's what you said.
I see. Well, did they make it up?
Well, sir, I don't know where they got that. I don't know why they said that. How do I know?
I see. Because obviously you're positive you didn't say it.
Well, sir, it's certainly not what I thought.
I see. But are you suggesting now you could have said it and you've forgotten about it?
Well, it's like I said, sir, the words could have come out of my mouth, but it's certainly nothing that I think happened.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Adams. All right, Mr. Affleck and Mr. Carter, would you please come up and we'll... Thank you. Well, Mr. Carter, I suppose one of the most difficult decisions to be made by counsel for the accused in any criminal case is whether or not he will be called as a witness. In this case, you called him as a witness. Can you tell us some of the reasons why you called him, and then we'll talk about some reasons why you wouldn't call him?
Well, I think that's probably the most important decision that you have to make in trial. In a case where the defense is one of self-defense, I think you're almost bound to call the accused if you can. I really don't think you have any alternative. He's got to get in the box and say he was so afraid that he had to do what he did.
All right. What would militate against calling an accused?
Well, a lot of people believe a criminal record would be a factor in deciding not to call an accused. I personally don't think that's necessarily so. I think the only reason why I would not call an accused would be if there was something that the Crown could get from him that they couldn't get from any other person. Apart from that event, I think I would call the accused.
What about the situation where the accused is given statements to the police which have a built-in defense?
Well, if you don't call the accused, you have the advantage of saying that he made these statements at the first opportunity before he had an opportunity to reflect on it or concoct anything. But if he did give his defense to the police and the police put the statement in, even then it doesn't hurt if he gets into the witness box and reiterates what he said before.
All right. Mr. Affleck, in this case, you, in cross-examination, made more than a few feet and perhaps a couple of yards with the accused on his statements to the police. Is what happened here usual, or is it an unusual situation?
Well, where a statement has been made to the police, such as the one in this particular brief, it becomes a very dangerous practice for the accused to go to the box, because if you have background information, as we did in this case, that the police, there was no atmosphere of oppression or any suggestion of impropriety, then of course you can make good headway, and particularly in front of a jury when you have a confrontation of that kind, which of course in the jury address indicates that you can indicate at that time the whole pattern of conduct, and that the second shot, which is a material one, was the excessive force, which is sufficient to negative the self-defense aspect. But there are occasions when statements have been given to the police and the accused can either qualify or explain them, or because of the circumstances under which they were given, he can reduce the effect of those incriminating statements. This was not one of those cases.
Mr. Carter, what about the record of the accused? Do you bring it out, or do you let the Crown do that?
Under normal circumstances, I'd bring it out. I ask him whether or not he'd been convicted of a criminal offense, and he would say yes, and I think I'd leave it at that. What
is your practice, Mr. Affleck, with regard to the accused record?
Well, if the defense bring it out, I don't refer to it anymore. Then it's always discretionary as far as cross-examination is concerned. In other words, I don't always cross-examine on the basis of fellow's record. I remember vividly a trial I had in Ottawa some years ago, and David Scott was defending, and he's a first-rate counsel up there in front of a jury. And I had this very aggressive police officer sitting next to me, and the accused had an unblemished record. It was a tire theft case. He was stealing mammoth amounts of tires from his employer. And I'd had a reasonably good cross-examination of the accused, and I made him make some concessions and so on. And the cop beside me kept saying, ask him about his record, ask him about his record. And he'd one offense, and it was a conviction of gross indecency when he was 16. So foolishly and naively and immaturely, I said to him, do you have a criminal offense? And Scott, of course, had the opportune time to jump up and say how unfair, how drastically unfair that question is. And the judge admonished me in the presence of the jury, which had a great deal of psychological prejudice, so that I say to you that if he does have an extensive record, it's a factor on credibility, believability, but if it's merely an offense which is unrelated to it, I would prefer to leave it out. So that the first situation is, if the defense goes over the record, leave it be, because it makes you look unfair and with a biased outlook. Secondly, if he does have an extensive record, I think the jury should be aware of that if the defense haven't brought it out, as Mr. Carter obviously would have done. And then the third point is that if it's an iffy situation, I opt in favor of not cross-examining on it.
Mr. Carter, does it make any difference in your decision to call the accused whether the accused is a man or a woman?
Depends on the charge, I guess. If it's an attractive woman charged with conspiracy to murder her husband, I probably wouldn't call her if I could get away with it. But normally, if she's a woman and she's a pleasant-looking woman, I think I'd call her. I think women are difficult for anybody else to cross-examine, and I think that's a help.
We won't get into all the ramifications, but if you and your client come to cross purposes about whether he will or he will not testify, and he insists on going in, do you have any practice about what you do to look after yourself?
Well, it's something that should have been decided a long time ago, and it's something that you have to make the decision about. I recall once circumstances changing, and he thought the case was going down the drain, and we had decided earlier he was not going to testify. He insisted that he wanted to testify because he thought it was his last hope. So I went over it with him. I explained to him that I thought that if he testified, he would be convicted and he would get a substantial term of imprisonment. He still insisted, so I wrote it out. I acknowledge that I've been instructed that it's against my interest to testify in this case, and that if I do, I will probably be convicted and I will probably go to jail for a very long time. I asked him to sign it, and he refused. And when he refused, he didn't testify.
Mr. Affleck, in your view, should the Crown always cross-examine an accused?
No. There are sometimes, I had a case recently, it was a murder case, and this fellow told such a totally outrageously implausible story that I felt reasonably assured that the jury wouldn't buy it. And I must say that over the evening I changed my course of conduct, and I did cross-examine him, and I made some strikes. But one of the jurors spoke to one of the county constables afterwards and said they just didn't believe a word he had said. The danger of cross-examining an implausible witness is to lend some credibility to his story. There's always a danger when you cross-examine somebody that you underscore and emphasize the points of his defense, and that which has been left in your favor may be turned around to become in favor of the accused. So there are times when you shouldn't cross-examine at all. Two examples. A fellow who appears to be outrageously implausible, I'd suggest you leave him alone because the jury won't buy it in our sophisticated society. The second is, and Bob's already touched upon it, is a woman. And I have second thoughts about that because if you make them cry, as I invariably do, you're going to have some difficulty in sort of reassuring the jury that you're not a bad guy. So that for those reasons, I think there are times when you don't cross-examine at all.
Mr. Carter, what about the length of the accused testimony? Should you start, the day after his first birthday and take him through, or should you just zero in on the question here was self-defense? Now, I know in this demonstration time is a factor, but would you ordinarily start back at year one, or how do you do it?
Ordinarily, I'd start back early to show all of the good things that he'd done in his life and all the people whose lives he'd saved and all the good things he'd done, so that when he got around to denying what was alleged against him, there'd be some reason to believe him. But I just don't have any courage, really. I saw a very effective examination in chief where the lawyer stood up and he asked one question: did you kill that person? The answer was no, and he sat down. It takes a lot of guts to do that, and I'm afraid I don't have it.
Now, Mr. Carter, again, those who witnessed the interview of the accused with his counsel on Monday morning last will undoubtedly have noticed that between that time and today, as they say about money, his language has been laundered. What is your view about the accused giving evidence and using four-letter words and things of that nature?
I don't think he should do it. I think you should clean him up, unless he is repeating something verbatim. Then, of course, he has to use the words. But I think in a jury trial, you're trying to sell something. You're trying to sell the accused to the jury. You've got to make the package attractive, and I think you've got to do everything you can to make him a product that you think they would want to buy.
Mr. Affleck, if from the statements the accused has given to the police and from your information, it's obvious to you that the language the accused is using in the witness box is considerably different to what he used in the police station and during the course of the events, do you go after him on that score?
No, not really. Not really. Invariably, that's a matter of maybe discussion beforehand. No, I don't. I don't get him to say four-letter words just because he's obviously used them beforehand. It depends a great deal. It depends. If his language is laundered to the extent it's a totally different concept that he's creating, then I think I'd go after him. But in the main, I don't dwell upon that kind of situation.
We didn't do it here, but we're told that in the some trials, the use of so-called demonstrative evidence with the accused becomes very effective, to wit, putting the gun in his hands. Mr. Carter, do you have any observations about that from the accused standpoint?
Well, I really think that that's an unfair thing to do.
Well, I'm asking you, supposing you want to demonstrate to the jury about how the gun was held for the defense of self-defense.
Yeah, I'd hold it.
You'd hold it?
Sure.
You wouldn't give it to the accused?
No. He starts to look guilty as soon as he starts handling the weapon. And I'd do anything that I could to keep it away from him.
Mr. Affleck.
It can be very effective, depending upon the individual, but you desist early in the game. I had a murder case some years ago on a place other than my own bailiwick, and I handed the gun to the accused, and he immediately threw it on the floor and said, "I never want to see it again." And I felt sorry that I'd even started this whole thing. So that I think that it depends on the circumstances. There's no question about it. It's an effective ploy if you can get him to Clay Powell, of course. I'm sure many of you have heard this story, but he tells a very graphic tale of how he has used that successfully, and I've heard other people talk about that. And the accused would wave it around rather menacingly and talk about it in a rather cavalier, calloused way. And as a result, this is extremely effective in front of the jury. But once again, it'll depend upon the accused, how well he's schooled, how well, or how he feels about a particular weapon. And I'd be very discreet about that because of my own experiences.
Mr. Carter, the accused was called in this case. Was he your first witness, your last witness, or somewhere in between?
Well, normally, I would like to call character evidence first if I could, so as to set the setting for the jury to expect a person of good reputation and the like, and then I would call him, and then call any witnesses that could confirm what he had to say.
Mr. Affleck, do you have any comment upon the course, the order in which the accused is
If
called?
it's an alibi case, I insist, and I have some authorities to back it up, and I recognize they go both ways, but if it's an alibi case, I insist that he be called first. And even if the judge rules against my insistence, it's a fairly effective argument to the jury that the accused had the opportunity to sit and listen to the other witnesses before he testified. And, but in the ordinary course of events.
In the case that you argue that, do you call your instructing officer first?
No, not necessarily. But that would be an argument that could be used against me, obviously. I call the officers in the order that I feel is requisite. I don't call the instructing officer first. I know that motions are made to that effect, and I always adopt the attitude that I control the evidence as a prosecutor, and I'll call the witnesses in what sequence I feel necessary. Most judges will rule in favor of that. But I think if I were to argue that specific point under those circumstances, I'd probably be discreet enough to do that, because I think it's a very effective tool that can be employed by the defense.
Now, Mr. Carter, what about calling the accused or any other witness, be they Crown or defense, by their first name? Do you refer to the accused as Mr. Adams, or do you refer to him as Henry John Adams, or how do you refer to him?
If he's a mature individual, I'd always refer to him as Mr. If, as here, we have a poor 21-year-old kid who got himself in this predicament, I'd try and create the atmosphere that he was a younger person. He's sort of on the fringe. If he'd been a little younger, I'd have called him by his first name. But I've seen some lawyers refer to the accused as the accused and call him just by his last name, such as Adams. I never do that. I always call him Mr., never call him the accused, and try and give him as much respect as I can.
Mr. Affleck?
I would call him by his surname, Adams. I wouldn't call him witness, I wouldn't call him accused, I'd just call him Adams, because you want to reduce the dignity of his testimony as much as possible, tactically, and from a Crown's vantage point, that's how it's done. Sometimes, depending upon the accused and the type of person, if you want to ingratiate yourself with him, you might call him by his first name, but in the main, I call him by his surname without the prefix Mr.
You sort of bark at him, too, don't you?
A little bit.
What about other witnesses, other than the accused?
Well, I obviously, certainly in a jury address, I don't call him Officer Janes or anything else. I'd like to call a police officer, rather than call him officer and sort of give the impression that the state is against this individual, I would call him maybe Mr. Smith said, or words to that effect. Most witnesses for the Crown, I would call them by Mr. or Mrs., as the case might be. And the one comment I might make in that respect, some judges, and I'm sure your lordship may have some knowledge of this, either from your own personal experience or from the attitude of your own brethren, some judges absolutely deplore any reference by a witness to another witness or another person by his first name, because obviously it can become confusing in front of the jury. If there are several Bobs involved and the witness merely says Bob said or Bob did, the jury may not be able to delineate whether or not it's Bob 1 or Bob 2. So they prefer that the witness, and this is something I try to do, and I'm going over the evidence in advance, will refer to somebody either by his full name, Bob Jones, or by the name Mr. Jones.
No, I think the same rules apply to all witnesses. If the witness deserves some respect, call him Mr. or Mrs. But if it's a Crown witness and he's an accomplice, call him by his last name for the same purpose that Bruce calls the accused by his surname.
That's all. Yeah. Thank you.